Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dimitar Kirchev, and I welcome you to the 16th episode of our podcast, Trading Patterns. With me, Mr. Nikolai Stoykov, the co-host. Hello, Mr. Stoykov.
Hello, Mr. Kirchev, and hello to our lovely audience.
Today's episode, second level thinking.
Yes, second level thinking. That episode is inspired by a series of lectures I usually give to incoming traders. And this is usually one of the favorite ones for new traders. So we'll see if our audience likes it.
All right. So what exactly is second level thinking? Is it related to Daniel Kahneman or?
Well, to a degree it is, but it's a little bit more than that. So I think that what Kahneman describes as the kind of like thinking slow is just a function, something we observe. But the true functionality of thinking slow is actually relies heavily on your view, how you view the world, what you view other people, and what you view yourself. And we're going to start with something very simple. So everybody's familiar with the normal distribution, and there is very interesting parameters in the normal distributions which are not immediately clear to many people. So first of all, if you separate all the men and women in Bulgaria, and one distribution women, one distribution men, their height would be normally distributed. If you gather those two distributions and put them together, you're again going to get the normal distribution. So that's actually very strange. If you get like people that are first graders and people that are seventh graders and you group them together, you're going to get two normal distributions with two peaks. But if you actually wait, I don't know, maybe about 10 to 15 years, they're going to merge into one normal distribution. So normal distribution is everywhere. Where you don't see normal distribution, your suspicion should be that this is a temporary phenomena that would go away with time. And this has very interesting kind of like conclusions or implications which are of big interest to our traders and I assume most of our audience. So if I tell you, Mr. Kirchev, and that the average person in Western Europe would have between 7 and 9 sexual and kind of like, emotional partners with two standard deviations distribution between 1 and 20. The implication of that is that most likely, this is like, kind of like, the empirical probability is that's going to be you. You're not going to have more than 7 to 9 girlfriends, or maybe certainly now more than 20, or the odds of that are very small. The second implication is that if you see somebody like, there was a book by, I forgot which athlete, that tells you that he slept with 10,000 women. First of all, I don't really know if that's physically possible. But the implication is that this person is probably lying. So we don't really know what's the distribution. Maybe those were escorts, prostitutes, but nobody has kind of like that many emotional and sexual relationship in mass. And while it's theoretically possible somebody to like, make women behave in a totally different manner at a very large number, that statistically should be impossible. So like,
That's like sleeping with 2 women for 10 years straight.
Something like that.
Every single day for 10 years.
Every single day. Every single day. Every single day. The implication here are like also very interesting. So the assumption of the normal distribution, or like, different outliers that are kind of aligned with the normal distribution, is something like this. If Michael Jordan is statistically the best, at least according to me, but many people think, if not the best, one of the best basketball players, one should not expect to beat Michael Jordan. So if you get like an outlier that's a very good specialist in his area, you probably should not expect to beat him. Mr. Warren Buffett is statistically proven that he's probably one of the best that ever lived managers, and his annualized return is about 20% a year, which means that nobody should be expecting, on average, over the long run, to make a kind of like, returns that are more than 20% unlevered. Assuming that there is leverage, and assuming that this leverage is free, and which is like a very big assumption, we have some sort of a deviation of maybe 100 if people use consistently leverage, which would be probably impossible to kind of sustain, but let's say that it's probably something like that. And
perfect market conditions.
Perfect market conditions, and never kind of getting wiped out by anything, and always kind of using the correct leverage, which probably statistically impossible. But yeah, nobody should be averaging 10x. So when you see somebody, in this particular case, we're speaking about Mr. Minervini, that supposedly is averaging 1,000% a year for some
the
portion
magician.
of the magician. I'm very skeptical, because normal distribution should be everywhere. And if Mr. Minervini has this kind of statistical result, he is much better manager and trader than Warren Buffett, which probably seems impossible, given that Mr. Warren Buffett is kind of very high on the value list. But yes, do you have any questions? Because we're gonna go further.
So, to put this in simpler words, Mark Minervini claims that he slept with 10,000 women.
Something like that. The most important thing is we are not saying that this is impossible. What we are saying is that this is statistically impossible. So there is different levels of kind of burden. So there is one absolute truth, and beyond reasonable doubt. And using the statistical analysis, I'm going to say that it's beyond reasonable doubt that Mr. Minervini's returns are not real. It's not beyond absolute doubt. So it's still technically possible, but kind of the probability of that happening is probably cosmically low. So we don't really know how cosmically low, but probably cosmically low.
All right. So, yeah.
Right. There is another interesting implication. The interesting implication is people that are basically kind of specialists in one thing. So if you look at people's specialization, people are very largely specialists in one area. And this is given by the example again by Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was one of the best statistical basketball players, only to be one of the statistically worst NBA owners. So just
I almost forgot.
Yeah, so just because you're a specialist in one area, even slight changes to your specializations is not necessarily something that you can actually have expertise. So going back to my kind of the idea that what's going on in my life, early on in my life, I wanted to be a version of Mr. Buffett, a version of Mike Tyson, and a version of Rasputin. That's probably statistically impossible. So so we don't really know why that is, but it certainly is true. But yes, second level thinking is basically realization that all the things that have happened before me and with other people are relevant to me. So interesting implications that happen to this one. So many of our listeners have taken probably economics classes where they say if you flip a coin 3 times and 3 times it's heads, that coin does not mean that it's going to turn heads. That is statistically correct. The question becomes, at what point do you going to believe or you're going to suspect that the coin is actually not fair? So how many times you flip the coin? 5, 10? How many times do you think you need to flip the coin before you suspect that the coin is not fair, Mr. Kirchev?
Anything above 3. I consider myself a lucky person.
Well, 3 is 1/8, so it's about 12%. Statistically, you want to go to the 5% mark. So basically, it comes at the 5 flip. For after the 5th flip, you're statistically correct. But you probably could wait for the 7th or 8th just to be extra sure. The implications for that is basically a very interesting implication. If you've had 4 or 5, let's say 5 girlfriends or boyfriends for our female audience.
The non-existent one.
The non-existent one. The common thing about them is what probably most women or large majority of the women or men in the population is. People do this very incorrectly. We have like this American kind of celebrity that is we spoke about, that was married 3 times and engaged 26 times, and her interpretation of those results is that basically she hasn't met her soulmate. The statistical interpretation of that is this is what we men are. Conscious separation from others. So in other words, is that people could be like really good or really bad. So that's the problem. In other words, is like that we basically all belong to like similar normal distribution, and in many areas of your life, you will be within 2 standard deviation of the distribution for most other people. So you actually be very comparable to kind of like different things. The interesting implication for that is like, as we spoke to, like, we spoke about the party episode, and many people assume that, like, if you have like a 3 standard deviation party life, you will have a 3 standard deviation sex life, but that's really not a given. People kind of assume many different things, that once you break out in one area of your life, this is automatically translate into all kind of areas, especially the ones that are common. But statistically, in my kind of experience, tell me that this is not going to happen.
So if I buy a Lamborghini, it's not statistically sure that I'm going to get the girls with it.
Right. This was a question that one of the people, like, we have an office in Istanbul, and one of the people kind of like, asked me, so Mr. Stoykov, are you gonna get like hair transplants? Like, here in Istanbul, things are like, leading kind of like, it seems like really they know what they're doing. So if I decide to like kind of implant my hair, I could do it. And I asked him, first of all, this is something that will not, it's kind of not what my peers do. I'm already 50 years old, and this is kind of more the domain that people in the late 20s, early 30s kind of seem to be doing. Then I asked him, what do you think is going to change in my life? Do you think that I'm going to get richer, I'm going to get healthier, I'm going to get more girls? Like, statistically, what is going to change? Do we have statistical information? And it seems like we don't have statistical information. But then I told him something that I said to him, but the truth is known. So it's like, that's why people say no pain, no gain. And there's very statistical significant emphasis on the kind of like construction of that sentence. Just because there is pain doesn't mean it's going to be gain. But if there is no pain, there's going to be no gain. In that particular sense, there's very little pain in actually getting a hair transplant. So the statistical results of what happens to you if you have a hair transplant should be close to zero. So it's like, you shouldn't expect anything to change your life. Or if you try to kind of get into physical shape, get in really good physical shape, since there is pain, one would suspect that there could be a gain. Going back to your example, the act of buying Lambo itself, since it involves very little pain or not as much pain, is probably not going to be statistically significant for good changes in your life. Yes, there are some women that's going to pay attention to you specifically because you got Lambo, but those girls are going to bring nothing good to you, most likely.
And even though they would hypothetically be impressed, that doesn't mean that they will end up in my bed.
Not only that they may not end up in your bed, that they'll actually be good for you. So it's like they may end up in your bed, but they may bankrupt you. And the sex with them is far from certain that it's going to be any good. And if it's good, it might not be that good for a very long time. It could be very quickly turning bad. So it's like, again, there is difference in between what's possible and what's what's most likely to occur.
Is the pain that you're talking about during the process of doing something good for yourself, that pain, is it only, when you say no pain, no gain, so when you go through the pain, is it because it affects you psychologically that it gives you the gain? You develop some sort of better self-esteem?
No.
No?
No. What occurs is we don't realize it, but our nervous system is making things up. What happens is 90 days after going to heaven, you're going to start seeing imperfections. So you're going to start saying that this grass should be perfectly 90 degrees and it's not 89. So what happens is your nervous system normalizes everything. And this normalization means that half the time you will kind of experience discomfort, or you'll find something that's not perfect. What are the, one of the kind of the sayings in Buddhism is, to live is to suffer. It's basically exactly this, that half your time you're going to suffer. And the question becomes not if you're going to suffer, but the question becomes more like how you're going to suffer and when you're going to suffer. So if you choose to work out or put an effort into something, you're kind of naturally making kind of effort that invariably will result in some positivity. Let me give you an example. If all you're thinking about, and this is probably majority of the audience, is sex and cars. Every day you're kind of looking at social media and cars, what you invariably will experience is sudden changes in mood that take you down. Unexplainable changes of mood that take you down. So it's you don't know why that is, and suddenly you think about a girl that kind of that was past in your life, and you would feel down. What would happen if you actually do put some very strong effort? You'd feel very chilled throughout the day. So you're not going to experience those kind of random moves down. Furthermore, you can actually experience sudden bursts of happiness. But yes, so what happens is, to live is to suffer means no matter what you do, you're going to suffer. And the only question is to make that suffering something useful. It's basically your life will be something I call nothingness. So basically there will be nothingness. Short bursts of kind of positive things, close to winning the lottery, which last about 3 months, which we call happiness. And a little bit longer, maybe 3 to 6 months, depression cycles when something bad happens. But yes, what people describe perfect happiness, that's impossible. Your nervous system is not going to allow it. what you refer to, like, making a self-esteem is you basically making good, something positive. But yes, you will suffer, and if you don't choose when to suffer, you're gonna suffer unexpectedly, with changes of mood, doubts about your positions, doubts about what you're doing, or suspicions about the intentions of others.
So the only way to experience sustainable happiness is to actually suffer more often. By suffer, I mean put painful amount of effort.
Just be aware. Just be aware that that's necessary. So, the best effort is the one that is small, incremental steps and constant effort, which is basically the idea of speaking well, in terms of being impeccable with the words. So basically, constant effort to choose your language, constant effort to make the best expression, to not be excessively emotional, either good or bad. Those are also efforts, and this kind of effort, being impeccable with the word, is the best effort. It is the best effort. But the kind of effect from that effort would take a very long time, and would also be useful to be physically strong. So other physical efforts also there, but the best effort is basically this constraint in your expression and communications with others.
Okay, what about a regular day trader? What effort should they put besides writing?
Right. I have something for our traders, and I shared it with Mr. Kirchev. Let me give you the idea how I think a trader should do. At this point in my life, I think a trader should write a plan or trading idea, something that should be basically developed by all kinds of things, based on data, and then he should write the opposing plan, very similar to the American jurisprudence system, where you have prosecutor and an advocate. So why you shouldn't do that trade? This is very uncomfortable. This is very uncomfortable because we usually stick one side of the coin. If we think somebody is guilty, we want to be the prosecutor. If we think somebody is innocent, we want to be the advocate for that person. But the reality is, you should be willing to change roles. And this is one of the biggest difficulties in terms of effort, that you should be looking fairly at both sides of the equation, not only establishing the position, but not establishing the position, or even establishing a reverse position. Not exploring fully all the opportunities. Yeah, I think this is what's really missing for most traders. So it's reflectiveness. Just to give you an idea, so I have a friend of mine that basically saw The Wolf of Wall Street, and he was telling me how he actually wants to go and see Mr. Jordan Belfort. And I reminded him, this guy was in prison, and he said something to me that, well, he's been in prison, but he's also successful. Surely he can teach me a technique on how to sell. And I told him, while he's teaching a technique how to sell, do not forget to ask him his favorite technique to how to give blowjobs. Because do you know what happens to white junkies that have no money in federal prisons? I mean, this is not like a rehab facility. So people look at those things, people look at that movie and read a book, and they really see the places where people exaggerate it, where people things that could end up differently. So ask yourself, if you had seen in The Wolf of Wall Street, Leonardo DiCaprio getting raped in prison, would you actually go and see that movie? You probably wouldn't.
I probably won't recommend the movie to anyone.
That's right.
I only recommend it because of the glitter, the fast cars.
Right. But this is where, like, in reality, this is what happened. Pain and pleasure are inherently linked. You start going that lifestyle, you end up broke and going to prison, and you face some guy Tyrone, which makes you his bitch and calls you Shirley. So that's what really happens. So yeah, like the important thing is ideally to stretch, to kind of stretch your perception, stretch kind of like what happens where people lie or people exaggerate. There's an error with every single movie on Wall Street, and there's probably an error with every single book. And it's kind of like people never really find it. So it's like the important thing is if you read a book or watch a movie and you don't find errors with it, something that's missing and it's important, you have not finished the book. You have not finished, the kind of like, the movie. So, yeah.
But how am I supposed to embrace the idea of a trade? It's a kind of a, I can't even call it conflict of interest, because once I see the chart and I see the chart literally fitting my trading strategy, how am I supposed to suddenly start, quote unquote, hated and see the opposite way? And at the same time, how am I supposed to see Jordan Belfort earning tens of thousands per day, driving a good Ferrari, and think about Tyrone raping him in jail?
Well,
it's not nice.
It's not nice, but yeah. It's all conditioned. It's all conditioned. So this is very uncomfortable. But in different stages of your life, every situation, there's gonna be a role that's gonna be kind of like appropriate, and you need to learn those roles and kind of get used to playing it. Nobody feels comfortable kind of switching roles. So you want to be an advocate, now you want to be a prosecutor, but it's a role you could learn. So it's like it's uncomfortable. It's something that you haven't seen, but it's a role that can be learned. It's just a role. I mean, actors play good guys and then they play bad guys. So it's like, it's not impossible. It feels hard because you haven't done it, but it's definitely not impossible. Definitely not impossible.
You had to do that on Wall Street, right?
You have to do that in life, not just on Wall Street. It's like, yeah, so it's like, but yes, what happens is like if you do not do that, what's going to happen is all those doubts that you have about the position are going to materialize later on as you have reached some volatility. So this what happens is, so this role, let's say you want to be the advocate of the position, but now you need to be the prosecutor. All those feelings will metastasize, would show during trade later on.
So naturally, you're gonna become a prosecutor.
You're gonna be a prosecutor. You're gonna kind of start having doubts about the position, but this would occur slowly and when you're actually not expecting. So it's like the best time to do it is in the beginning. So like be an advocate and then be a prosecutor. Obviously, new information is going to be learned, but invariably, one leads to the other. So it's like there is inherent neutrality in kind of in nature, and if you're the advocate, it means that the role of prosecutor is going to be hidden from you. It's going to come unexpectedly. So if you choose the role of advocate and then you choose the role of prosecutor, the kind of changes in positions or opinions or fears about the position are not going to be as bad or may not even occur because you've examined it very thoroughly. So it's like, the role of prosecutor occurs when you actually have doubts about the position due to volatility.
And if you're prepared in advance, the prosecutor might not even show up.
That's right. Or you have enough evidence. So you would have thought about all this thing and be ready. Yeah, and be ready. I was thinking about this, this is something that is absolutely relevant to me today. I'm kind of bought some China positions. So it's like I'm kind of gotten very bullish on China. And I hadn't exactly festered this idea. So this occurred, I bought the China position before I realized that this is what's needed, and kind of like, started thinking about it. Maybe I should liquidate my China position. So it's like, it's kind of like it hasn't really gone anywhere, and buy something that's S&P. So that occurred to me today. And I thought about it, and then I said to myself, well, the analyst rating for all the Chinese stocks that comprise the large Chinese indexes are basically 50% higher. And those valuations are really kind of excessively low. So I decided that beyond reasonable doubt, not just my opinion, but analyst estimates, if all those stocks are worth at least 50% higher by the estimates of all those analysts, I should accept their judgment and stay with the position. So the relevant factor here is if 20 people have the same opinion as you, and those 20 people are specialists, that opinion is probably correct. You could lose on the trade, but that kind of thinking is probably that works in the long run. So yeah, in that particular sense, the prosecutor for that position will be it's the Chinese Communist Party, which is very scary. Mr. Trump imposes very harsh tariffs, which is very scary. But all those things kind of like haven't really happened. And then it seems like the Chinese Communist Party interested in taking the market higher. And there is another pattern is like every single time central banks decide to do quantitative easing, Japan, European Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, stock market always goes higher. So we haven't had that many quantitative easings throughout history. It really starts in Japan in 2001. But every single time we've had quantitative easing, stocks go up. So that's another pattern.
So you stopped the prosecutor on your trade?
Yeah, I mean, at least I have a good argument why I do it. I felt comfortable. I said you have QE that's kind of like probably in the process of kind of being generated. You have kind of like, excessively low valuations. You have excessively low consumer confidence in China, which is like a 20-year low, lower than 2008, lower than COVID by a lot. And I decided that this is enough for beyond reasonable doubt. The doubt is still there, so the Chinese Communist Party could do something, Mr. Trump could do something, but I think that the pattern of making decisions is just basically looking at valuations as a whole in the indices and kind of like, the catalyst for why valuations should be higher is this quantitative easing. So, yes, that's what I'm thinking.
Any estimated time for that trade?
About 2 years. I'm happy to report that I think microcycles we did when I said it was very bullish. I wasn't probably the best decision I did, but I bought some SPY calls, and I closed them about last week with 300% profit or something like that.
Show off.
But I decided to that this is too much, and I don't want to do options. So I decided that to go. Maybe I was crazy to do options in 2023 to buy those options, and should have stuck with maybe just a little bit more leveraged position. But decided no options and to go with this straight with the underlying.
Probably the only person that's gonna make 300% and give up on the asset.
Well, the most important thing is this is again obviously I was taking a lot of risk. So if you do it and you kind of split for 2 years, you're making 300%, 150% a year using leverage, but still got very lucky timing on the exit. So like the exit, like it was very good. On the entrance, like, wasn't that good, which usually is the opposite way. Like usually my entries are much better than the exit, but this time like I really timed it. But invariably comes up to this, like, what's ailing people is that you're excessively eager to embrace risk. So you're always going for like the home runs. And I've come to believe that just returning the ball is what's probably gonna take me further and a much better trajectory. So buying options is something that was probably unnecessary, and if I keep doing it, it's just a matter of time that something unnecessary will happen. So I decided to lower my expected return, but also reduce the volatility and the potential for loss.
So buying the SPY options was an attempt, successful one, for a home run.
That's right. And that's very difficult for most people to understand, that you've kind of carried drugs across the border once, and to realize, okay, I'm not going to do that again. And people don't do that. If you carry successfully drugs and you don't get busted, people usually do return. But in this case, maybe because I have a little bit of experience, I decided I'm not going to do that. So going forward.
Cool. Really cool. Anything else on second level thinking?
I think that's it.
All right. I just want to finish off with something Mr. Stoykov told me a couple of days ago. And it's an advice that I kind of read it every day, and I want to pass that advice to our listeners. He said explicitly, health, energy, and money. If something increases those for me, it's good. If something decreases those, it's bad.
Right.
That's a really good advice, because we were on that particular day, we were discussing cars and we were discussing how women and cars affect a person's life. So women and cars decrease health, energy, and money.
The most important thing is to realize that statistically speaking, like, you're born, like, think about it this way. People are living up to the age of 30, and you needed to have like 10 kids in order for to have 4 of them survive, hopefully with different women. So we are born in excessive sexuality, and kind of like the sight of women is something that kind of like, excites you too much. That's kind of like similar on the other side, sight of puppies or kids. For women, excite us too much. But everything is neutral. Women are neutral. Kind of like cars are neutral, kids are neutral. And what happens if you see the pleasure or the happiness, the only logical conclusion is that pain and unhappiness are hidden, but they're going to come. And yes, so we really need kind of like a consistent way of kind of measuring things. So for example, people ask me, do I miss like the partying lifestyle? I think it was just a mistake. So it's like, partying, while exciting, it didn't do anything for me. It didn't improve my health, it didn't improve my wealth, and to a degree I actually do regret it. So maybe I was thinking about this, like, if I hadn't gone partying in New York, maybe I would always think about what partying was. But having done it, I think it's a mistake. So in many different ways, life is just to explore, to see things. But yes, like, what is good for me is not what I feel. What is good for me is increases my health and wealth. And like, the Lambo is just a symbol of that wealth, but it depreciates and kind of like, decreases your wealth. I mean, had like a friend that bought a Porsche and he was going to insure it. And apparently all the people that kind of buy expensive cars were using the same salesman. And it turns out the car insurance salesman was sending his kids to the most expensive private school in the New York City area. So I can immediately tell you whose wealth is increasing like the most, like the car insurance. Yeah.
That car insurance on such cars is ridiculous.
That's right.
It's
And
ridiculous.
yes, so the girls in bikini may or may not happen, but that car insurance.
The car insurance is there. The depreciation is there.
Yeah,
The repair costs are there.
He's gonna send his kids to the private school. So yes. So health, wealth, and energy. So yeah, watch for those. If something decreases that, that's not good. And people say like, but aren't kids then decreasing energy? And yeah, kids are bad. Kids are good for themselves. Like they absolutely destroy your bank account. And yeah, so
worst return on investments.
yeah, so it's like people say kids are good. I'm glad you feel that way because there is statistical evidence that they're not.
Shows the opposite, yeah.
And I'm sure that not everything is statistics, but like let's just say they're neutral. So it's like,
yeah. Thank you, Mr. Stoykov.
Okay.